If you've got £50,000 saved, here's how I'd invest that into UK property in 2026. You should start by buying a rundown property like this one for £60,000. You don't have enough to buy this outright in cash, so you would use bridging finance. You would put in a 25% deposit, which is £15,000, and bridge the rest. After paying the stamp duty, legals and survey fees, you've spent £20,000 of your 50k budget, leaving you with £30,000 left. You then refurbish that property for £25,000 to increase the value of the house. After the refurb, this property is now worth £115,000, which is supported by local sales comparables. You then refinance the property at the higher value, which is £86,250. You pay back the bridging loan, you spend a little bit on the refinancing costs, and you're left with £40,000 of recycled capital to go and buy your next property with. You then put a tenant in the property to cover your mortgage plus a profit, and you repeat the process. This is called buy, refurbish, refinance, and it's the most powerful strategy in property. So if you've got £50,000 saved and you want to invest that in property, go to our marketplace, jamespropertyclub.io, which is like Rightmove, but for property investors, and you can find our end-to-end service to help you with finance, refurbs, and tenant management, just like these investors already have. And make sure to follow James Property for more tips.
All right, so congratulations for those of you who are tapping into this, but I disagree. Firstly, I disagree that the most powerful strategy in property is buy, refurbish, refinance. And I also disagree that if you got £50,000, that this is what you should do with property. What I would say is this. There's two camps of people here. There's the people who have the £50,000 and the people who don't yet have the £50,000 who are going to watch a video like this and then aim to save or create that £50,000 so that they can go and do this. And a number of years ago, nearly a whole decade ago, I did a video on my YouTube channel called The Difference Between Restoring Value and Adding Value. And effectively in that video, I was talking about the biggest problem with this strategy, buy, refurbish, refinance. Now, it's a great strategy. I take my hat off and literally share that it is a great strategy. No one is denying that. However, the problem with the strategy is most people who encourage people to do this strategy don't tell you that the biggest issue with this strategy is knowing the difference between restoring value in a property versus actually adding value to a property. Now, there's one specific issue in this video that I think is very problematic. And as a result, I'm going to bring that up. That is, if you're doing a £25,000 refurbishment on a £60,000 property, that property is then going to be worth £115,000. Now, listen, on paper, if that occurs, that's absolutely brilliant. And there are definitely places around the world where that might happen. But in the UK, that is something we have to question. Now, there's certain areas where you might be able to get those kind of uplifts, okay? And I can mention like the area of Fleetwood, for example, you know, the outskirts of Blackpool. There's areas like that where there's, you know, specific areas, the Blackpool that everybody knows of with cheap properties, where you don't get the uplift massively, but the surrounding areas to those areas, you get the uplift because nobody knows about those areas in the same way, okay? So it is possible in the UK to potentially buy a house sub 100,000 and invest a amount to refurbish it and potentially get a double valuation afterwards. However, the challenge I have is thinking that that's going to be created with a £25,000 investment. Why? Because 9 times out of 10, you're going to be making the cardinal mistake that I spoke about in my video a few years ago, which is you're going to be restoring value. Now, what's restoring value? You're going to be putting a new kitchen where there was already a kitchen. You're going to be putting a new bathroom where there already was a bathroom. And mind you, yes, it might be a nicer kitchen. It might be a nicer bathroom, but the reality is it's just a kitchen and it's just a bathroom. So it's only so much it can increase the value. The key to buy, refurbish, refinance that actually makes people wealthy is the fact that they're not restoring value on properties that they buy. They're adding value, okay? Typically adding value, as an example, might be taking a garage that's already with the house and converting the garage to something more valuable, like a bedroom, or taking a garage that's already with the house and turning that into some form of an extension, like an additional reception room or two. This is adding value. It's adding value that allows us to actually increase the value so substantially that we're able to ensure that the overwhelming majority or all of our money comes out when we do things like a buy, refurbish, refinance strategy. Now, The reason this is so important is because there's many people on the internet that are going to tell you, follow them, do the strategies they're talking about, but very few of those people are going to tell you about the big hiccups that occur with these people doing these strategies. So my whole thing, especially if you're a part of the community, is just be informed, get the awareness, get the wisdom, the knowledge, and the understanding. The Bible talks about all three. And the problem is most people think all three are the same thing. They are not all the same thing. You need the knowledge so you can have awareness. You literally need the understanding so you can assimilate that awareness. And you also need the wisdom so you can act upon the awareness that you have been able to assimilate. So with that basic landscape, now we understand why I don't necessarily think that the buy, refurbish, refinance strategy is the most powerful strategy in property. A question you might be asking is, Samuel, well, what is the most powerful strategy in property? And I'm going to tell you that I believe the most powerful strategy in property is the one strategy that every other strategy is dependent upon. Before you can do a buy, refurbish, refinance, you need this strategy. Before you can do the typical old school vanilla buy to let, you need this strategy. Before you can do a rent to rent, you need this strategy. Before you can do a lease option, option agreement, purchase lease option, it does not matter what strategy we're talking about, assisted sale, auction. Even if we go into the advanced strategies, advanced LHA, it doesn't make a difference. Every single strategy you can ever discover or you can ever learn will all not work unless they first tap into this initial strategy, which I believe is actually the most powerful strategy in property investing. And that strategy is the sourcing and selling. Okay, the sourcing and selling, or you can just call it the sourcing. This is the reason why a number of years ago I created a program called the Sourcing Blueprint, where I was literally teaching people and showing people how to find great deals. Because if you can't find a great deal, it doesn't matter if you buy it. It doesn't matter if you refurbish it. You're going to have an issue when you try to refinance it. If you can't find a great deal, you can buy it, but you probably have a problem when you try to let it. Okay. If you can't find a great deal, then you might be able to rent it, but you won't be able to rent it. Right. And this is the reality of the actual property landscape. The property landscape has one core principle, which I learned when I was 19 years old and worked as a full-time estate agent. And that is we make our money when we buy. We make our money when we buy. And the basic ethos of that framework or that statement or that principle is that you have to know going in that this is going to work. And the only way you can know going in that this is going to work is if you're someone who has been able to source a great deal. And this is why I have said for over a decade that property sourcing, the acquisition of the property, is the greatest strategy in property investment. Now, hopefully this has been of value to you. If you've got specific questions about sourcing properties, if you've got specific questions about buy, refurbish, refinance, feel free to let me know in the comments below. But side by side with that, as you go on your journey, for those of you who already have the £50,000, before you just jump into doing what someone talks about on social media, the first thing you should do is get the knowledge. Second thing you should do is get the understanding. Third thing you should do is get the wisdom so you could take action that's going to be prolific and pay you profoundly. Now, the last thing I want to share on this, which I think is going to be super, super crucial, is what do you do if you don't have the 50,000? This is the second group of people. If you're someone who doesn't have the £50,000, but you're saying, Samuel, I want to get into property. What can I do? Here's what you do. You go and discover how to uncover great property deals. Go and learn exactly what I did when I didn't have £50,000 at the age of 19, but I wanted to start my property investing dream. I started to discover how to source and sell properties, how to find properties that are great deals and sell them to people who had the 50,000 or sell them to people who had more than 50,000 so I could be remunerated. And after doing that again and again and again, you build up your own war chest so you can then use that to go and invest. With that being said, Samuel ICanWin signing out. Remember, small keys open big doors. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you got some value out of this one. And I look forward to seeing you on another one. Let's go.
Small keys open big doors.